Let's see here. I am in the process of going live now. All right. And that. Okay. Says I'm going. So let's see. All right. And all right. Let's go to the live screen and call it a day. All right. Well, I am a bit earlier than I expected, but I figured I'd go ahead and do it. Seeing as how, to be honest, a lot of times nobody shows up. Um, that's fine, honestly. But I am actually here today to go over my thoughts on Gencon and a game I picked up at Gencon. I'm going to be reviewing the games I picked up at Gencon over the next few weeks. Wasn't super blessed with funds, so having having some games to come back home with me is a nice thing. But in case anyone's unfamiliar, my name is Jeremiah McCoy. This is the basics of the game. I try to go on Twitch every so often and talk about different games and different game ideas if I can. And I also put this over on YouTube at my account over there, Brother Saul on YouTube. If you want to go on there, I'll include some links there. I've been a gamer for a good long while. For those of you who are new here, I actually started playing D&D in the early 1980s. When I was 9 years old, my mom bought me my first D&D set. And that was because she was tired of me getting into hers. So, what am I talking about today? So, I went to Gencon. Gencon was a lot of fun. Gencon is always a lot of fun. It was a bit of a working holiday for me, as is the case with a lot of aspiring game writers. You want to meet people, you want to talk to people, you want to get your name out there and sort of get a feel for the people that you may only talk to online most of the time. So that's a factor. Another factor is I was running games for Kobold Press. You may notice my Creature Codex t-shirt. I was running games for Kobold Press. Ran 4 games, and that was a lot of fun. I met a lot of really interesting people that way. And then I, did a few passes through the dealer's room and picked up some things and spent more money than I probably should have. Such is life. One of the things I picked up was Threefold. Now, Threefold is the latest RPG from Green Ronin. Actually, better way to... Let me back up and reframe that, because there is some reframing that needs to be done. Green Ronin has been publishing games for a while, and in particular was publishing the Age system for a while. Now, the Age system, Adventure Game Engine is what that stands for, started with Dragon Age. They got the license to do the Dragon Age role-playing game. It's been around for a while. It's really good, actually. Dragon Age has a really compelling world that, people really like. I played the Dragon Age computer game quite a bit, so I was predisposed to like them. Pardon me, I'm going to reposition myself, so there may be noise. I apologize. All right. So, anyways, much more comfy. Are you comfy? Let me redo that. Are you comfy? I'm comfy. Let's all be comfy together. Anyways, the Dragon Age game is, has been around for a long time. The Age system is the engine used in the Dragon Age game. And somewhere along the way, they determined, you know what, we need to separate this off into being its own thing. And then they came out Fantasy Age, which is great. I like Fantasy Age. It coincided with a game run by Will Wheaton called Titan's Grave. They did a whole thing on YouTube. There's been news about that lately. You might go look it up. A lot of people really liked Titan's Grave, really liked Fantasy Age, so there was a lot of desire for content there, and it was a relatively original setting written by Will Wheaton and company. There weren't a lot of follow-ups. Again, go look up the news. There's a whole thing, and I don't want to dig into that thing, but there's a thing there, and I wish I knew more details about how it affected the release of the game. That said, Fantasy Age rolls along for a little bit. They have Blue Rose, which is a game that started in a different system and then got converted over to Fantasy Age, and that rolled along for a bit. And then they came up with Modern Age, and Modern Age was a variation on the Fantasy Age system, removed classes, removed races, and just sort of continued that evolution. And then they went back to the licensed game settings. You ended up with the Expanse being announced to be run in modern age. As a huge fan of the Expanse books and the Expanse TV show, I was there for it. I'm here for, the Expanse. And the modern age system, I really liked it just on its own merits. But I backed the Kickstarter like a lot of people. The Expanse RPG. There was also the Lazarus RPG, which is the modern age system used with a comics property created by Greg Rucka. Greg Rucka, excellent comics writer. You should absolutely go read some of his stuff. Stumptown, I recommend it. Whiteout, Lazarus, all of them are really good. And then you had the core system, which didn't have a settings per se. You had to license property. Well, Threefold comes in as the original setting that they came up with for modern age. It fits into that world. Now, when modern age came out, some of the art was actually suggestive of Shadowrun, which not a bad thing in and of itself. Shadowrun makes some beautiful products. So a lot of people were thinking in terms of Shadowrun when they looked at the main book. And this is not Shadowrun. This is not something like Shadowrun. But some of the art cues are still there. If you look at the middle art, it's very sort of cyberpunkish looking setting, and then there's magic throughout. So it would be easy for you to get that impression, but that's not what's going on. What's going on is Threefold is an interdimensional campaign setting. So picture, if you will, that the universe has lots and lots of different planes. You have the other worlds, which are relatively benign, magic-heavy settings. Things like, the land of fairy to a certain extent. A bunch of worlds where magic is super common, and science not so much. And, wizards and elven... or elven, not quite elven, they have a different name, but elven type structures and races exist. Then you have the netherworlds, which is the hellish version. They are dark, corrupt, painful, unpleasant worlds. And then in the middle you have the earth. Or I guess a better way to say that is the Earths. Earth has multiple sort of echoes out there, multiple sort of alternate timelines, but they're all linked to this core prime Earth realm. And that Earth realm provides the multiverse, the metacosm, a stability, because the Earth realm has science and rules and things that it follows. And that sort of structure is where all of these stories sort of fit into. The Threefold setting is set in this metacosm where you can travel to magical other worlds or nether realms or even alternate timelines of Earth. If you're familiar with the series Man in the High Castle, you sort of get an idea of what alternate Earths might look like. They're Earth, but with something that happened that changed history from the one we know. There's one that they describe in there where things went horribly awry, and a nuclear war happen and the world is in fact ruled over by machines. Things like that could happen in this alternate Earths available. Now, the different factions sort of vie for control of these worlds, and I think that this is a really deep setting with lots of moving parts, so it would be kind of hard for me to go into too much detail. They introduce the idea of adding ancestries. Ancestries are, well, you're human, you're still human, but you have these sort of enhanced magical traditions in your bloodline. Let me see if I can get you the names of them, because my name memory is bad, so I'm just going to go bring them up and so I can read them to you. So these ancestries actually replace portions of backgrounds. The features of backgrounds, you trade them out for features of ancestries. And the ancestries give you sort of magical elements. You have the Arvu, which are kind of like elves, is the best way to put it. They're she that are they are possessed of magical elements that tie them to nature. Some of them begin to reflect natural world, like leaves growing out of their hair or antlers or things like that. And they have certain magical advantages related to that. You have the Dragur, or Drager. It's not actually clear on how to pronounce that. But the Dragur are sort of tied to giants and ancient bestial mythical creatures. All of these have sort of a mythological legendarium origin to them. And the Dragor are more sort of the bestial, the more primal, rage-filled legendary creatures, and that bloodline passing through humanity. You have the Huldra, which are sort of like dwarves and gnomes and knockers and just sort of legendary, short, crafty people. They're good with making crafts. They're very tied to metal. And then you have the Jana, or Yana, I'm not sure if that's supposed to be pronounced Jana, I think, which is the sort of core humans, for lack of a better description. And these are the sort of ancestries that you can add in to give you... They sort of take the places of races. The difference, one of the big differences is you can be of a particular ancestry and not take any of the traits. You can say, all right, I have the physical appearance of Dragor, but I don't actually take any of the mystical advantages. I just look like one. It's obvious that I'm of that ancestry, but I haven't changed out any of my background abilities to take those elements. So that's a big difference from, say, fantasy games where you have a fantasy race or something like that. Modern Age doesn't have classes. You've got backgrounds, you've got professions, you've got now ancestries, and you use talents to build up what you can do. This setting has a couple of different kinds of magic systems. There's a sort of psychic or psionic magic system. And then there is the Arcana, which is like spell casting. And then there's augmentation, which is... So the Prime Earth has sort of a technological society made up of... I guess the best way to put it is like primal machines, the machine gods that have existed for a long time, and they sort of restrict the level of technology that is available to humanity for its own safety, but they also help give us stability to the rest of the metacosm and provide the tools to drive back the terrible things that are out there. Mechs, power armor, things like that, cyborgs. They're the people that work for them. Can be cybernetic and what have you, and that's where you get those augmentations. And you can't have like one or more than one of these types of enhancements, whether it's augmentation or magic or psionics. You can't have all three, or can't have two of each. You can only have one. If you have augmentation, you can't have psionics or magic, and so on. And those are sort of the broad strokes. I don't want to actually. Part of the problem with talking about this game is there is a whole bunch of depth to the setting that is hard to encapsulate easily, and by doing so, you might compromise what people might do for their game. Game masters, for instance, there are a bunch of factions, but do you tell the players all the history? That there were sort of godlike beings, and they created servants, and those servants also kind of were worshipped as gods. And do you want the players to discover this in play? Which I think is the better way to do it, is to sort of have them start small and work their way out and join groups and become parts of things. Or do you give them the full description, the full debrief, the exposition, as it were. As far as the setting's depth goes, in some ways, I think of it in the terms of, you've familiar with some long-running fantasy and science fiction shows out there. As time goes on, they accrue a certain level of complexity. There's a bunch of moving parts that manifest as they go through time. A perfect example is the show Supernatural. Supernatural actually has a mythology to it, a metaverse of its own. You know what's going on with heaven, you know what's going on with hell, you know what's going on with demons and angels and God and gods and death. And as they went through, they sort of became more and more complex. And to describe all the things in Supernatural would take time. Threefold reads like it is the 10th season of a show. And all of those things that accrue over time come pre-made, pre-added. And I think that is one of... That's going to be maybe a hard pill to swallow for some. I don't mind it myself. I love lore. So give me lots of lore to read. I'll be a happy camper. But it does mean that it can be a bit daunting for new players. I think that there's a lot to digest and get into. I think what they're presenting is really fascinating. Like the Predexicon, which is the secret government that runs the world. Yeah, it sounds weird, but yes, the secret government that runs the world actually controls all of the technology that is going on with Earth, and it's way much further advanced than what you normally see on Earth. In general public, deals with machines that can journey back and forth to the alternate Earths. To sort of mine them for information and mine them for technology, and look for threats. You can do a story, you could do a whole campaign just off of that idea, because that's a whole bunch. Like, there's a bunch of alternate worlds that you could have your players go to and discover how history went differently in this world and how that becomes a threat to everybody on your world, or doesn't. Maybe you're just there as an observer, and can you stand by and watch as something terrible happens on this world that you know how to stop because we went through that and got past it, and these guys didn't. That alone is enough story for most games. But then you got these other planes. You have the netherworlds, where Alastors, which are basically devils, ruled these worlds with an iron fist, and they were terrible, and they had to be driven off, and they finally got beaten, largely due to the forces of Earth coming and getting into the fight. But they also have people who grew up in those netherworlds and aren't necessarily pure evil, but they are all about strength and survival. The Night Host. The Night Host is basically, if you're not strong, you don't need to live. And they go forth and conquer worlds to take all the people that they can find that are strong and give them a chance to be strong. Which is better than the hellish existence they had under Alastors. But are they good guys? It's kind of hard to call them good guys. They're kind of bad guys. In any other story, they're bad guys. But there's a whole moral complexity that you can deal with there. And that's really fascinating. The other worlds are basically run by a sort of United Nations of other planes. And they don't include Earth. They partner with Earth. They think Earth is great, but they don't include Earth. So what's your status when you go there, if you're from Earth? The secret government that runs the Earth has embassies all over the place studying the science that they can find from the interactions with magic and the technology and the worlds that exist in weird situations. There's the host, the Night Host's homeworld is an infinitely long ribbon that varies in width. There are lots of planes that are just bizarre that way. There's a plane where the godlike figure that was there, in its death curse, cursed everyone to turn to stone who knew its name. So when you go there to investigate, you find a bunch of statues standing around. That's pretty terrible. And then you go research who this person was. And there's a chance that if you learn this sort of godlike figure's name, you will turn to stone. That's cool. That's super interesting. That's fascinating stuff. And so you start tossing in all of these things. The magic. There's lots of magic that you can pull on from different kinds of arcana, different kinds of magic coming from the different worlds, to the psionics, which is more of a netherworld thing. And there are also psionic guilds on Earth where the psions all think that they're sort of superior to everybody else. There's a dozen things that would make campaigns by themselves thrown into this one setting. I think it would be daunting for some people to talk, to sort of dive in. I think those things are great fodder for games, though. I think it's worth people's time to dig in, but I think it is also daunting to try and dig into them, and so it's sort of a mixed bag here. I think, I think that the core book, which is gorgeous, by the way, it's a great looking book. It's got great art throughout. Let's see what direction that went. Is just it's well written. There's lots of stuff. I feel like in some levels, I wish it was like 3 books, because there's a bunch of stuff in here that I want to sort of dig deeper into. And a lot of this is built off of the modern age rulebook. There's a lot of core ideas that are in the modern age book. This is not a standalone. You've got to have that. And you're going to be switching back and forth, because there's a lot of go check out this thing in the modern age rulebook to see the rules on this thing I'm telling you about. And that happens a lot. But I think that I want a book about the guilds by itself. I want a book about the Prodexicon, the secret government that runs the world. I want a book about that alone. I want a book about the Night Host alone. And I suspect that's the point. I think that's what they want, right? They want to be in a situation where you go, oh, I want a book on this. Because, publishers, they want to sell books. Go figure. So I am interested in this setting. I think to sell it to my friends, I'm going to have to work a little harder to try and explain what it is. Because it is new, and it is complex. And selling, I need a hook. And I'm not certain that I have a hook. That's the one thing I think this book maybe does lack, is this is what you're doing. Like in Shadowrun, you know what you're doing. You are working for different corporations to steal from other corporations. That's the activity of your set of the game for the most part. There are other things you can do, but that's the core thing. Dungeons and Dragons, the core thing is you go out as a group and adventure in the world and explore dungeons and fight dragons and monsters and collect gold. That's your core activity. I'm not certain I have a good answer to what is the core activity of Threefold. I used to have friends tell me about the book The Black Company. Now, The Black Company is a famous fantasy series, and it is well loved. Lots of people love The Black Company. And every time my friends told me about it, they made it sound terrible. Because they never really dug into what made the setting interesting, what made the story interesting. They would tell me the cool thing that was cool to them after they had read it. After they had gotten into the series and gotten into the things, and they tell me a cool thing, and there are flying whales, and they're serving for this goddess, and what? And I kind of feel like if I try and explain this to my friends, I may end up in that situation. So I got to find a hook to explain why I think it's interesting. Because I do think it's interesting. It's throwing 10,000 things into the air, and you can do a lot of stuff with it. But I need to figure out the hook, because I'm not sure what that hook is right now. I mean, it's got lots of cool things. You want to be a wizard who travels through dimensions? Cool, we got you covered. You want to be a cyborg who travels between different worlds, different versions of Earth's history? We got you covered. You want a combination of those? We got that. You want to be a giant rage monster that smashes essentially demons? Cool, we got you. We got you covered. But I'm not sure how to sell it. And I want to sell it because I want them to publish all the other books. that this feels like it needs. Like, I want the book on the guilds. I want the book on the sort of interplanar UN. I want the book on the cyborg sorcerer or cyborg soldiers going to different versions of Earth's history. I want all of those. I think they'd be cool. And I don't know if I'm going to get them if I can't convince people to go give this a try, because they should. It's really neat. So I hope somebody else will come along and say, this is what I think the pitch is, the hook, what draws people in. Because it is really cool. Right now it feels like here's a slightly narrowed version of the generic awesome you can do with Modern Age. We're going to give you more options and give you a structure around those options. I need a hook. Does that make sense? Maybe it doesn't make sense. Maybe it only makes sense to me. It's a possibility. Anyways, beyond that, I like what it's doing systemically. The thing I like about Modern Age is it gives me some of my old school stuff that I like without giving up some of the narrative things that I also enjoy. It doesn't. It walks a line there, which I find a hard line to walk, to be honest. And I think it is a system that more people should give a chance. I think it's really cool. Let me see here. Some of the iconic art from the Modern Age rulebook is sort of, the characters are the same characters in the Modern Age book are treated as iconic characters in this. I always like the idea of iconic characters in role-playing games. Probably the most pronounced version I've seen in recent years has been Pathfinder. Pathfinder does a really good job of having iconic characters and doing stuff with iconic characters. And it looks like Green Ronin picked up that particular idea and has run with it, and I'm absolutely okay with that, because I think that iconic characters give you a hook to understand and embrace the world. If anything, I would like them to write some fiction in this world, using some of those iconic characters, so that you can sort of hand that to a potential player and say, here, read this. This will give you an idea of what the world's like. But anyways, that's my thoughts on Threefold. I think it's a good first start. I really want the rest of the books that it hasn't written yet. If that makes sense. Which is probably a good sign. Like, I find the world interesting enough that I want more of it. But I will add the proviso, as I said earlier, I'm not sure how to hook people into it. And we'll see how that goes. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed my little discussion with Threefold. Like I said, I had fun at Gencon. Gencon is a massive thing. I picked up a number of games while I was there. I could not get some of the games I wanted. I wanted to pick up the Cyberpunk box set, the quick starter for Cyberpunk, and they were sold out every time I went by the table. They'd get a new set in the mornings, and then it'd be gone by in the evening. There were a bunch of books from Green Ronin that I wanted to pick up, but I had to be a bit stingy with my money. I will pick them up eventually, but I haven't picked them up yet. I picked up the new Shadowrun starter box set. and I'll be digging into that one later. I picked up and I picked up another supplement for Shadowrun. Um, what can I say? I'm a Shadowrun nerd. Yeah, go fig. I like D&D. I like Shadowrun. I like Greenrun. Pretty much, if you put a game in front of me, if it's not Fatal, I'm probably going to get excited about it at some level. I also picked up the BattleTech box set because I like BattleTech, and I've been playing the computer game a lot lately. Hoping to convince my friends to play with me. But yeah, Gencon is a huge thing, and I think everybody, if you can go to Gencon or a convention like Gencon, although it's hard to get like Gencon because it's so big. If you can go to a Gencon, if you can go to a Gamehole Con or PAX Unplugged, a convention where the focus is games, not here's a separate gaming track, but that's not why we're here. But a game where, yes, the games are why we're here. It is a very interesting social dynamic. You end up with people just like, hey, you want to get together and play a game tonight? Sure. What game? This game. Okay. Well, I've never played that. How do I play? And you just sit there and play it. There's no, well, are our schedules going to mix? Can we figure out how to get this to mesh? That kind of thing just doesn't happen at Gen Con. You are there for the same purpose. All of you are. And so you get that sort of excitement that comes with just being able to sit down and play with your friends. That's pretty awesome. I remember a couple of years ago, not this year, but last year, I got to sit down with Brandis and Rabbit, who are longtime friends of mine, Stoddard, and I met Dan Dillon that year, and James Introcaso, and a couple of other guys who I've always loved their stuff. So it was nice meeting them, and then we just sat down and played Shadows of the Demon Lord in the middle of the night. We were just like, yeah, we're just going to sit down and play. Cool, I've never played this. All right, this is all you need to know. Oh, excellent. And we had a fun little game. That is my idea of a good time. It refreshes my energy. It recharges me to do stuff. And I think that is the thing that I needed. Is something to sort of recharge my batteries, my intellectual batteries. I've got a podcast that I need to be recording soon for. Actually, probably should have recorded it a few weeks ago for the Tome Show, another episode of The Monster Psychologist. They take a while to produce because I'm doing a lot of research for them. I'm breaking down the history of particular monsters and their various iterations and their most iconic iconic representations at times. And so that means I actually have to sit down and read a bunch of stuff and organize my thoughts and write it all out. And that takes a while. I've been working my way through Liches, and I kind of hit like a writer's block in July. Between that and the writer's workshop, I had hit a writer's block. And I came home and I was exhausted for the first few days because, takes a lot out of you for 4 or 5 days at a convention with 70,000 people will do that to you. But in the past couple of days, I've been like, all right, let's get back into it. Let's type this out. Type. That's how that works. You're just type. Hand wiggling fingers, hands doing this, because that's how you do that. Anyways, I was just like typing away, and I've got that script mostly done, so I'll probably be recording that this week, theoretically, assuming nothing else goes wrong. And then I'm diving back into my writer's workshop adventure RPG Writers Workshop adventure and finishing that up. That's on my list. And then I need to find an editor, take a look at the 2 adventures I've written, see if somebody can do some editing. But I'm excited to dig back into them. And that's something Gencon gives me. Recharges my batteries. And yeah, I want to make games again. I want to be working on this. I want to, really get my brain just rolling to make all of the things that I wanted to make. So that is the thing I love about Gencon, is it gets me in there and in a mindset that makes me want to just let's keep going, let's push, because all of my friends were there and I felt like I should, well, not all of my friends, obviously, I have other friends who weren't there, but I felt like I should push myself to feel like I belong there to a certain extent, which I guess is kind of imposter syndrome-ish. But it's, it's still there, that feeling that I want to belong there. Each year I come home going, yeah, that was great. I want to feel like I belong there, that I belong in that company of people. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. It's only about 45, 46, 47 minutes. But, I'm getting back into this. And I wanted to make a point of, all right, I'm back. I've recovered. It's time to start doing this again. So I'll be doing this again next week. And I'll be covering probably the Shadowrun box set. We'll see. And I plan on doing something like this every week going forward. So if you like this, give it a follow, and share it around and tell people about it. And hopefully I'll keep doing this. I'll keep doing this until my brain peters out. I've got lots of games to go through that I haven't gone through yet. And I look forward to talking to you guys again. But enjoy the I hope you enjoyed this, as rambly and strange as it was. And I will be back. See ya.